In Chapter 6, we're going to be exploring testing and assessment in career, and a lot of this information will be helpful when you do your peer career counseling interview assignment. So, like using any assessment in a counseling setting, in using assessments in career, we want to let the client do most of the talking. So we don't want to be really prescriptive. And again, reiterating what we've already discussed in previous chapters, the point of assessment is not to match someone up to a career or tell them what they should be doing for a living. Rather, use these as a tool for exploration. So the assessment should be a conversation. It should be a launch pad for discussions. It's not really seeking to give one answer about what someone should be doing for their career for the rest of their life. So it's not just about reading out the outcomes of an assessment. You want to go beyond this and you want to really engage the client in a conversation about their perceptions, reactions, experiences, and thoughts related to things that are part of the assessment and have come out in the assessment outcomes. And then, just like with any assessment, as counselors, we want to make sure that we're using really understandable common language as opposed to using jargon or things that are very clinical in nature that might be hard to understand. And we always want to qualify the results. So, this is a tool for exploring. This isn't necessarily a prescriptive, like determination of what you should be doing or shouldn't be doing. And so you're qualifying the results with, this is one data point. There are lots of other ways to explore so that we can have a better understanding of your career and your understanding of career. Again, assessments are one piece of data, and really they're the most effective when the client is heavily involved. And so, in terms of why we use assessment in any sort of counseling setting, but certainly in career as well, we need a reason for using any sort of assessment or test. We can't just use it to fill time or because we're not sure what else to do. We have to really have a purpose and sense of intention in using any type of assessment tool. And our goal here is learning more about the needs of the client, the interests of the client, um, any kind of goals for the clients to help them learn about themselves. And so this supports the process of the client determining their sense of direction, progress, and change. So ethical considerations in using any type of assessment, but career assessment, since that's specifically the conversation we're having. So you have to be familiar with what you're using. Take opportunities to practice and familiarize yourself with these assessments. That's why we practice with them in this class. It's really important to know how to administer something, how to score something, how to interpret something before you pull it into work with a client. Because if you're not comfortable with it, the client's not going to feel comfortable with it. And then both of you are going to feel really uncomfortable together. And that's not what we necessarily want to bring into the counseling session. So we have to be competent in what we're doing. We have to be familiar with the assessments that we're using. We have to know how to administer them and interpret them appropriately. We have to make sure that they match up to the needs of the individual client and paying attention to things like diverse populations. So when we get into talking about commonly used assessments, it's important to look at norming data. So when this assessment was developed, was it normed? Was it tested? Was it developed with diverse client populations in mind? Or was it predominantly created and normed on a more hetero or a heteronormative sample without a lot of diversity? And a lot of the commonly used assessments, originally that was the case. There was not a lot of diverse representation in the groups of individuals that were used when they were creating validation and reliability data originally. Now, some of these have been improved over time with more diverse populations, but you just want to dig into that a little bit. You want to understand how assessments were developed, with whom they were developed, and so are they the most appropriate intervention for your client based on the identities that they hold. And then we always want to use informed consent. So I don't want to just pull an assessment in without talking to my client first. helping them understand what it's for, why we're using it, what's going to be asked of them in the process, and then making sure I get consent from them to bring it into the counseling world and into the relationship with the client. So generally, you're going to want to have knowledge about some aspect of statistics, because with some of these assessments, there are some statistical principles related to the outcomes. You want to know what's available to make the best choice that you can for your client. You want to know about that standardization and norms and the representation in that group, and then how reliable and valid these assessments are. So in terms of reliability, consistently over time, can I count on this assessment generally working the same way and coming out with pretty similar outcomes for the same person over time? Maybe there's some slight variations, but with something being reliable, I know that I can count on it to work the same way every time I use it. In terms of validity, I want to know that it's accurately measuring the thing that it's supposed to measure so that I can comfortably bring that into the session. So for the remainder of this chapter, I want to dig into and give you some examples of different types of assessments that you might interact with in the world of career work. And I want to give you some examples of assessments and talk through some assessments that you're likely to use in your peer counseling assignment. And then these will be linked in the assignment portal, so you can take a look at them yourself and decide which assessments you want to use. So a lot of assessments look at career-related interests or values related to career or skills related to career. Those are sort of the big main areas of career assessment. And so some examples of some batteries of assessment. And when we say battery, we're not talking about like double A's or triple A's here. We're talking about a series of tests that are put together intentionally to give you a really dynamic picture of something. So there's lots of different types of testing batteries out there, and there's some related to career too. So the COPS is an example of a series of tests that are related to things like career interests and different type of career interests. Similarly, the Cooter Navigator program is also about interests and skills related to different types of careers. And the Cooter Navigator website is linked there. You can go on and explore. It's got some really great tools. So getting into more of the skills side of things, we have aptitude and achievement tests, which assess your level of knowledge about something or your potential for developing knowledge related to something. And some of these might sound very familiar to you. So the ASVAB is the aptitude test that's used by the military for an entrance exam. So an ASVAB is used for individuals who are wanting to enlist in the military, and it's got some basic skills and knowledge that you would need, and then they have a minimum cutoff score that's required. For different branches of the military, there are different cutoff scores on an ASVAB test. Then, of course, we all know about the SAT and the ACT and the GRE. So SAT and ACT are, of course, commonly used in high school graduation and in college admissions. And then the graduate records exam, the GRE, is often used for graduate school. And then, of course, we have things like the MCATs or the LSAT, similar assessments that are used in admissions to things like law school and med school. So we have those aptitude tests that are commonly used as well. And then we have the ONET Ability Profiler, which is an interest inventory, really useful. It'll be linked for you in a couple of slides, and it's a really great, really basic interest inventory that then connects to ONET Online. ONET Online is a career exploration website that's maintained by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they have a lot of really great information about different types of careers, different options, and then it connects information related to common salary in the area where you live for that career that you're interested in. And you can link to things like apprenticeship websites or career openings to find out what's available in your area in that particular career field. There are lots of other great tools out there. Some of those are linked here below. Some other examples of commonly used interest and value inventories We have the Campbell, the CISS. That's generally used as an exploration tool for students who are looking at going into college. The Harrington CDM, Career Decision Making System, is a really simple self-scored inventory that combines a couple of different areas, including your ability, your interests, and your values related to career. The O-Network Importance Profiler, which really is a value sort of an online value sort about things that are important to you related to your career fields. And then there's always things like self-directed search online and the strong interest inventory, which has been around for a very long time and is that assessment that you commonly think of that matches you up to suggestions of career fields that are good to you based on the interests that you have. Other examples, there are some assessments that are focused on career development in a sense of maturity. So we have ACCI, which is about your adaptability and your ability to change and grow within a particular career field. The decision efficacy scale, again, looking at how mature and a bit like your career decision-making skill set. The career thoughts inventory, which looks at attitudes and maturity related to your sense of how much you understand about different types of career fields and how you go about making decisions. And then quality of life inventory. And then there's a couple of different versions of this. And so that is about different factors in your life that could be contributing to success or struggle in career, but maybe are not specifically career related. Looking at different life factors that could also be contributing to your success in a career field too. We have some personality related assessments. The California Psychological Inventory, or CPI, is one that's maybe not as commonly used, but I would imagine that most people have, at least on a cursory level, heard of an MBTI, a Myers-Briggs type indicator, and we're going to take a few minutes to explore that, as that might be an assessment that you choose to use with your peer partner. So just linking a few resources here that you might choose to use with your peer partner. So there is the interest profiler. It's very similar to a strong interest inventory. And to take a genuine strong interest inventory, generally you have to pay a fee online to take that. You might be able to take it through your career services center at your university, but the interest profiler through ONET is incredibly similar to a strong interest inventory. And so that might be a tool that you choose to use, as it's free and widely available with both your clients and your peer partners. And then again, a true Myers-Briggs type inventory assessment typically has a fee associated with taking it, but there are lots of copycat MBTIs out there that kind of give you the same results. And so this one by Human Metrics is a free, accessible online version of an MBTI. It's not exactly the same as a genuine MBTI, but it's still going to give you a similar readout that you can use to practice interpretation. And then just linking the ONET Resource Center online. Encourage you to go on, play with it a little bit, and see all the different resources that are available. So let's take a moment and talk about the MBTI. It's one that I think we hear about quite a lot. So the Myers-Briggs type indicator is originally based on the work of Carl Jung and then became adapted by Katarina Briggs in the 1920s. It's been around for a very long time. And so Myers-Briggs nowadays we see used quite a lot in the world of business. And we've seen some employers use an MBTI as a screening tool when they're trying to hire new employees. So it can just tell you a little bit about yourself, but then you can take it a step further and you can match occupations based on your personality type and tasks that are interesting to you. And so the theory is that if you are mismatched in terms of your type and your career, you might have a lot of burnout or negative experiences. And if you do have a match, you probably have a more positive experience. So MBTI is considered to be pretty reasonably reliable and valid with individuals of all genders and across various ethnicities. It's been around for a long time. It's largely based on self-report. It's not terribly complex, which is nice. And there's not really a right or wrong answer. There's not like a type that's better or worse. It's just a tool for exploration on a continuum. So from an MBTI, you get a 4-letter readout that represents your score. And then in a true MBTI readout, you get this scale that tells you how far you are from the middle of the different types that we're about to talk about. So you could be really hard on one side or the other, or you could be sort of more in the middle. And it really is meant to help you understand how your personality might interact with or connect with career-related issues that you're experiencing. So getting into the different MBTI types, so there's 4 letters, there's 4 different options when it comes to types. So the first is an E or an I, more extroversion or more introversion, which is really a question of how do you receive energy? Is it more from other people, or is it more internally and needing time to yourself? And then you can imagine that there are different careers that are better suited for someone who's more on the extrovert side of things as opposed to someone who's more on the introvert side of things. Then we have S or N, more sensing or intuitive. This is how you make sense of the world. So S is more like I have to see it for myself. I have to touch it, to feel it, to interact with it, and then I can make sense of things. So I have to really observe something closely, and then I have a pretty good memory for the details because I've gotten to interact with it. Whereas the N is more about intuition. And so you can sort of think more forward and you can consider things more in the abstract without necessarily needing to interact with all parts of it directly. So you have an S or an N, a T or an F, a thinking or a feeling. This is how you make decisions. So the thinker is more logical, analytical. I have to sit down. I have to know everything about something. I have to ask a lot of questions, gather a lot of information, and then I can make a decision. Versus the feeler, and this is more based on your own values, values of others. Um, and so you can sort of sit down and judge what's the best thing to do in this scenario, even if I don't have all of the information. So it's much more subjective, much more based on your own sense of value, direction, and understanding of the world, as opposed to the thinker and feeler, who's very based on fact, logic, and analytical process. So you could be a thinker or a feeler. Then you could be a judger or a perceiver. And this is how much structure you need to be able to function. So the judger needs a lot of organizations and they're about goals. They're very goal oriented. So you need a plan, you got to make decisions. Um, you generally want to start things early in the process and then you got to do one thing at a time. So we're going to do this task, we're going to finish it, and then we're going to move on to the next. The perceivers, they're more open, flexible, adaptable. They don't really love a ton of structure. They would rather have things a little more freeform, a little more creative. And these are our procrastinators. So you put something off for a while and then you feel that time pressure very close to a deadline, as opposed to judging where you feel that time pressure pretty much consistently throughout a task. So a judger or perceiver are very different in terms of the way that they approach things. And again, as you can imagine, would connect differently to different types of career fields. So putting these together, we have these 4 letters that represent a type. And these are just some examples of how those get connected to different career fields. So an artist, for example, might be more introverted, more intuitive, more feeling, and they might be a bit of a J, or they might be more of a feeler, um, or a perceiver, excuse me, versus someone who's a computer analyst, which is an introvert and much more of a thinker and a judger. And so we see how these 4 types go together to outline someone who might fit really well into certain career fields, noting that an ENFP is where counselors tend to lie, although I have heard that counselors do tend to fall more on the I side of things, or sort of in the middle, especially those who work individually. So just something to think about. But I'm curious for you to take a moment and think about, where do you fall? Are you more of an E or an I? Are you more of an S or an N? Are you more of an F or a T? So what type do you feel like you would have? And then, of course, we have to bring Harry Potter into this. So there are all of these really fun things out there that match up the Myers-Briggs types to characters in popular media. This one is Harry Potter. And so it matches up different characters from Harry Potter to different Myers-Briggs types. Similarly, we have them for Star Wars characters to see where you might match up in terms of characters in Myers-Briggs types. So there are lots of really fun things like this out there too. Myers-Briggs is really well marketed. It's out there quite a bit. It's very familiar, and so we see a lot of these connections and these fun visuals to connect types to different popular media. So just a little fun thing to share. So the last thing I want to go over with you, again, helpful with your peer counseling assignment, is how to process these types of things. So when you're using these inventories, for example, personality inventories in a Myers-Briggs, these are the types of questions you might use to process that with the client. Because again, you want to bring it back to the session, you want to interpret, and then you want to have a conversation. So do you feel like the outcomes of this assessment accurately describe you? Give them an opportunity to disagree. Based on this, what do you feel like would be a work environment that would fit well for your personality traits? What do you think your lifestyle might look like in the future based on what you've learned here? How have these contributed to your career situation? How do you get along with others, etc.? So giving you some examples here of ways you can process. So just some other examples here of questions that you can use to interpret and discuss career outcomes using assessments. So, like, how do these interests influence how you connect to a work environment or don't connect to a work environment? How do they influence your goals, what you do for fun, your relationships with others? And how often are you getting to connect with these interests in your life and in your career space? So, again, just some examples for you as you're getting into your peer counseling assignments. And just some more examples here related to values. So giving you some more examples here about how your values might have connected with your choices, with your career, with your experiences. Want to show you the Enneagram. These are also becoming very popular, and we use Enneagrams in career as well. So if you don't know what your Enneagram type is, there's a link here that you can follow to take a test. You can discover your Enneagram type, and then you can see how those Enneagram types are connected to different career fields. So another kind of fun and interesting thing you can dig into. And then I want to talk briefly about some qualitative assessments that you might use. So we can do a career genogram to track different careers in your family lineage and maybe how that influenced your direction, your values, your choices when it came to career. Then we have a lifeline. This is marking different influential events, often including life and career moments or transitions, to track where you are now and where you feel like you're going. We can also make a lifeline that looks into the future. We can make a roadmap. So if somebody has a goal, we can create a roadmap with smaller goals and stepping stones to lead to that goal, determining what types of steps someone might need to make to get there. You can also do things like roadblocks and anticipate things that could be problematic and how you would address them. So really great tool to talk through goal setting. And then there's some different structured interviews. You can post some of these in the module as examples. So there's things like career and culture interview or career styles interview that are more scripted that you can use to walk through and learn more about your clients.